More than 35 million people have taken the TOEFL since its creation. For most of them, a specific score on the test is required by the academic institution they are applying to. Usually, getting that score is not easy, and applicants might need to take the test multiple times before obtaining the necessary result, if they ever get it. It would be highly unlikely to get a great score on TOEFL without any kind of preparation, even for an advanced speaker of English. Well, in fact, even for a native speaker, a test like this would be particularly difficult if they didn't have an academic background. For that reason, it is absolutely imperative that you have a plan to prepare for the test, and I'm here to help you with that. In his book, The Art of War, Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu says, "If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. But if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." The lesson is clear. If you want to defeat TOEFL, first, you need to know what you're actually facing, and then develop a deep understanding of your current level, strengths, and weaknesses, and determine if you're ready to meet the challenge at this moment. TOEFL stands for Test of English as a Foreign Language, but the name itself doesn't reflect the real nature of the test. It is designed to measure your ability to understand and use English at the university level. That is, it evaluates your reading, listening, speaking, and writing skills to determine how well you can perform in a variety of academic tasks, such as attending a lecture or writing an essay. However, despite its academic orientation, TOEFL is not only used by schools and universities. Some governments also use the exam as a requirement to grant immigration visas, and many employers use the test to assess the level of English of their potential or current employees. Nevertheless, no matter the reason why you're taking the TOEFL, you must be aware that every task in the test regards academic topics. Most probably, you will take the digital form of the test. During your preparation, you should take the time to know the computer interface very well, so you don't waste time trying to figure it out during the exam itself. Besides, you must be prepared for a very noisy test environment, full of distractions, in which it won't be easy to focus. Other applicants will be seated at their station at different times, and they will be recording their answers for the speaking section right next to you. It's very important to consider this fact during your study sessions and to properly prepare for that. The exam is also really long. You're going to spend at least 4 hours at the center, and probably more because that's just the duration of the exam itself. So your endurance, your patience, and the ability to concentrate over long periods of time will be put to test. And these are all skills that can be improved with an adequate preparation and training. It wouldn't help much to start your specific preparation for TOEFL if you don't have the necessary general English skills first. Very often I get requests for one-to-one TOEFL preparation courses from candidates that are a long way from the minimum level required to start a program like this. What's more, the time frame that they have in mind is usually extremely unrealistic. It is still possible to prepare a TOEFL-focused preparation program for basic level students, but the time frame must be realistic. Such program would include the essential topics covered in traditional basic English courses, but at the same time considering specific vocabulary for the test. For example, when I teach how to give and understand directions, which is a very typical unit of a basic course, we learn them in the setting of the university campus. So, Once you're ready to start your specific training for TOEFL, what are the topics you'll have to study and master? The following are the most critical aspects I include in every plan I design for my private students. You can use this list as a template to make your own training schedule. I'm sure it'll help you a lot. No matter your starting level, you should begin with some essential grammar by reviewing two very important aspects of language: tense rules and word order. Review all auxiliaries and understand how they interact with verbs and transform their meaning, keeping in mind that a simple translation to the corresponding conjugation in your language might not be enough to really grasp their correct use in English. Also, study modals and, very important, their substitute form in different tenses. For example, you can't use must to express an obligation in the past. So what's the alternative for it? Word order refers to the way words are arranged in a sentence. And that's a critical part of English, because changing the position of a word in a sentence usually has an impact in its meaning. In English, there isn't much freedom to move around the different elements of the sentence. If you don't arrange the words in the right order, you might end up saying something entirely different to what you originally intended, or something that simply doesn't make any sense. In TOEFL, you don't want to sound like Master Yoda. Then you need to review link expressions, such as conjunctions and connectors. Just as I mentioned before about auxiliaries, the sole translation to your language won't be enough. You need to study how and when to use these expressions. For example, some of them only work with clauses, which is an expression that has a subject and a verb, like in I bought it although it was expensive. And others can only go with phrases, which is when there is no subject or action performed, like I bought it despite the high price. You must elaborate your own arsenal of link expressions for different uses, like adding a new point or idea, making contrast, comparing, indicating reason and result, and so on. Next, you have to learn how to correctly report what others said. When we report someone's words, we usually change the tenses, word order, pronouns, and even prepositions from the original statement. For example, if a character from a TOEFL recording says, "I'm working on my dissertation. I'll see my supervisor tomorrow," you'll have to report it like this. She said she was working on her dissertation and she would see her supervisor the next day. There are specific rules to do this, and you need to review them and then practice until it becomes natural. I mean that you can do this without even thinking about those rules. This skill will be critical for speaking and writing tasks. Before getting into specific vocabulary for TOEFL, I recommend you to familiarize with the name and function of each of the different categories of words in English, or parts of speech. I'm talking about nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, articles, and so on. I guarantee you that being aware of the different categories of words will accelerate your acquisition of vocabulary dramatically. Let me demonstrate with an example. If you're learning the word arbitrary, which is an adjective, that was an arbitrary decision. You can also study the noun arbitrator. We need an impartial arbitrator. The verb arbitrate. The council will arbitrate among the parts. And the adverb arbitrarily. The system was arbitrarily chosen by the government. Now, about vocabulary acquisition. Many of my students have already used a lot of academic English before starting their preparation for TOEFL. They constantly read books and articles related to their fields of study, and maybe they've already written essays or papers in English. The problem is that this knowledge tends to be very narrow and specific. If your field of study is gene modification for agricultural purposes, for example, then you don't need to know much about Western philosophy. Unfortunately, in TOEFL, The passages you read and the lectures you listen to can be about any academic topic that you can imagine. Geology, astronomy, medicine, food industry, biology, and so on. According to the TOEFL description in its website, you don't need to have previous knowledge of the topics being covered in readings and lectures. However, it becomes really difficult to follow the passage if you don't have at least some background on the topic being discussed. So, once you have developed the necessary language skills, read widely and watch videos about a broad range of topics. Learn, for instance, about Greek mythology, ancient and modern history, our planet, the universe, animals, plants, and of course, English literature. Before taking the test, you should know about Beowulf, Hamlet, and Moby Dick, just to name a few. Read and watch documentaries about controversial topics such as climate change, migration, and gene therapy, so you can develop your own opinion about them and then practice how to express that opinion in English. You'll also need to learn some specific vocabulary related to the university itself, like its different locations, administration building, dorms, lecture theater, and so on. The staff, professor, lecturers, and tutors, and of course the different situations that might be represented in the test recordings, like lectures, seminars, and tutorials. It's always a good idea to learn more sophisticated academic collocations and idioms before the test. Collocations are combinations of words that usually go together. For example, adjectives that collocate well with the noun evidence are considerable, substantial, and growing. There is growing evidence in the role of climate change in amplifying the severity of wildfires. An idiom is an expression that has a figurative meaning, which is usually different from the original meaning of its individual words. For example, being in the spotlight is not necessarily about being on a stage illuminated by a spotlight, but being the center of attention. If you are able to use sophisticated collocations and idioms naturally in your speech and writing, your overall score will surely improve. Your preparation plan wouldn't be complete without practice tests. There are some sample tests available on the official TOEFL website, but apart from that limited material, you won't find many good quality practice activities for free. My suggestion is to get books or courses that come with an app or some kind of computer version of the practice tests. That way you can familiarize with the interface and train in a more realistic setting. Unfortunately, no matter how advanced that software is, there are some sections from the test in which you won't get any feedback from the app, such as speaking and writing tasks. Evidently, an ideal preparation program should consider hiring a private teacher or coach who can provide feedback and advice regarding your productive skills. As an alternative to this, some books include sample answers with their corresponding score, so you can get an idea of how they are evaluated in the real test. Make sure you read them. I understand you might feel a little bit overwhelmed after discovering how massive this challenge is. But I assure you that if you follow these steps, there is nothing to fear. Your only concern is having enough time. In the end, it's all about devoting the necessary time, effort, and resources to this venture, and you will succeed. Good luck! And one final piece of advice: the best moment to start your preparation program is today.